Though built for the military, ENIAC was the brainchild of two young civilians, J. Presper Eckert and John Maudsley. In 1946, they left the university and set out to start a business selling computers. They found little enthusiasm for their idea.
Generally speaking, when we talk to businessmen and banks, financial institutions at that time, they took a very dim view of all this, and they really didn't have enough insight to see into the future far enough to believe anything like this could work. My father signed a note at the bank for $25,000, which helped us get started until we could get going.
With this modest sum, Presper Eckert and John Maudsley launched the world's first commercial computer company. This small Philadelphia firm constituted the entire world computer industry in 1946. The first order of business for the two entrepreneurs was to find a customer for their product. But who would want to buy such a complex and delicate scientific machine?
When Eckert and Maudsley proposed to make a commercial venture out of building and selling electronic computers, a lot of people were very skeptical, and they raised a number of very interesting objections. The first one was that the machine was made out of large numbers of vacuum tubes, and these tubes were prone to burning out. In fact, if you could keep one of these machines running for a few hours before a vacuum tube burned out, you considered that great.
But a worse problem was the machine's complexity. To make a computer do what you wanted was no easy task.
You almost required an understanding of very advanced mathematics or logic to even get the computer to add two numbers together. And people felt that such a talent was so rare in the world that it didn't matter if you could mass produce the computers, you would never find enough people who had that skill to make them useful.
Undaunted, Eckert and Maudsley looked for a customer with a need so desperate that they'd be willing to take a gamble on the new technology. And they found it here. The US Census Bureau employed hundreds of clerks to process population data. They were drowning in records, with enough paper to fill a football field.
They had a census coming up in a few years, and the time it took to process the census was getting longer and longer. And they are mandated by Congress to get the census done in a certain length of time because elections are based upon it. And they were fearful that in the following election they wouldn't get done in time without something better than they had.
The technology used for record keeping and accounting had been around since the turn of the century. Armies of clerks slaved away, punching data onto punch cards and then processing that information on other machines, which sorted the cards, added numbers on the cards, and printed out results. But this whole tedious process, and the clerks who operated it, could be replaced by one single computer. Or so Eckert and Maudsley tried to convince the Census Bureau.
We thought it was magic. We didn't believe it was really feasible to begin with. As we talked more and more with them, we came to believe that they knew what they were talking about and that they had already demonstrated some important aspects of it in ENIAC.
In September 1946, the first contract for a commercial computer was signed for the price of $350,270 and not a penny more. This footage, taken with John Maudsley's home camera, gives an idea of the optimistic spirit in which this young company set out to found a new industry. They named their computer UNIVAC, for Universal Automatic Computer. But within a few months, Eckert and Maudsley realized they had vastly underestimated the time and money their pioneering work would require. The company soon fell badly behind schedule and seriously into debt. It was a pattern the two inventors would repeat time and time again.
They were terrific engineers and designers. They were not terrific business people. They had problems, and they gave us estimates, and unfortunately for them, in a sense, we made a contract with them, a fixed-price contract to produce a UNIVAC, which ties us down legally. And that wasn't enough money for them to produce a UNIVAC, nor was the time schedule enough. These are not criticisms. When you're doing developmental work like this is what you expect to run into. But they hadn't anticipated enough of this kind of a problem.
Alone in their field, Eckert and Mauchly were inventing the future, and there were many unknowns. They spent considerable resources developing the electronic equivalent of boxes of paper files, storage devices like magnetic tape, and tanks full of mercury. Charting this new territory took its toll on the company. After a year in business, the Eckert-Mauchly Computer Company was struggling to stay alive. They needed more investors, or at the very least orders with money up front to tide them over, and time was not on their side. But in 1948, when things looked hopeless for Eckert and Mauchly's company, help came from a most unlikely source.
Riders up.
The American Totalizator Company, makers of the mechanical equipment that calculated odds and displayed the winnings at racetracks, was headed by Harry Strauss. A man of vision, Strauss foresaw the day when computers might replace his totalizator equipment. To hedge his bets, Strauss purchased a 40% interest in Eckert-Mauchly, injecting desperately needed funds into the company. For the next year, the Eckert-Mauchly Computer Company underwent rapid expansion. The staff increased from 40 to 134. But this prosperity would be short-lived. Eckert and Mauchly's last best hope vanished when Harry Strauss died in a plane crash in October 1949. 1 month later, Strauss's partners notified Eckert and Mauchly they wanted out of the computer business.
And they just wanted to get out of something which they regarded as a financial loss. They also didn't think it was going to work. They didn't have any faith in it, as Mr. Strauss did. And so they encouraged us to get somebody else to buy the idea out as soon as possible.
Without backing, the Eckert-Mauchly Computer Company sank deeper into debt. The pair, who had started off with such high hopes, were forced to sell out to Remington Rand. Remington Rand sold a variety of products, including typewriters, filing cabinets, and punched card tabulating machines. But to the general public, they were best known for their electric shavers.